for today's, sorry, we're being recorded. Thank you for joining us today's webinar, organized in partnership with the Nature Conservancy. We have some really inspiring panelists with us today, and with you as the audience and your questions, which we hope you'll keep coming in, I'm sure we will have a very insightful conversation. By way of introduction, my name is Samantha Hung, and I'm the Chief of the Gender Equality Thematic Group here at the Asian Development Bank. Our team is partnering with the Environment group today, our colleagues in organizing today's event, and both teams are part of the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department here at the ADB. Today, we're really honored to have colleagues from ADB, the Nature Conservancy, otherwise known as TNC, and the International Union for Conservation of Nature, otherwise known as IUCN, on our discussion group. We are also live casting this webinar on Facebook, and a recorded version of the meeting will be available to stream after the event. And the information on where to access this link is posted in the chat box. We know you have colleagues joining us from across the region, so please, if you could put in the chat box where you're joining us from and your organization, that would be really, really helpful. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them into the question box in your Zoom panel, and we can bring them up during the presentation and also have time for questions at the end. Please also, as always, now that we're in the virtual world, remember to keep your mics turned off if you're not speaking. The format of today's webinar is a panel discussion followed by a question and answer. So now I would like to turn to my colleague, Jinfeng Zhang, who is the Chief of Rural Development and Food Security, Agriculture, and the Officer in charge of the Environment Thematic Group, and he will say a few welcome words. Over to you, Jinfeng.
Thank you so much, Chair. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar on gender and also resilience in coastal community to celebrate the World Ocean Day. ADB is happy to be collaborating with the Nature Conservancy on this important event as a part of our recent partnership agreement on action on the nature positive investments, environmental sustainability, and also the action on climate change. First, I would like to express my appreciations to Robbie James, the Gender and Equity Advice for the Asian Pacific region, and her team and TNC for their support and contributions to today's event. Of course, I also want to acknowledge this event is a good cooperation between our environmental thematic group and also the gender equality thematic group. This is the first time, and of course, we're going to do more in the future. Many thanks to Sam Ho, the chief of the gender equality thematic group, for your team to work together for this important webinar. And of course, I also want to express my great appreciation to VP Ingrid Vanves for your joining us today, despite of your very, very busy schedule. Let me quickly to share with you some good progress we made on the Ocean Health Action Plan. As many of you already know that to address the challenges facing with the ocean health, ADB launched the Ocean Health Action Plan in 2019, which aims to scale up investments and the technical assistance in ocean health to $5 billion from 2019 to 2024, combining the finance from the ADB, of course, with the other sources. During the last 2 years, of course, we made some progresses. Today, total finance commitments are estimated about $2.2 billion already from the 2019 to 2023. I also want to share with you, we made some good progress for the public-private partnership as well. I'm happy to announce yesterday our PSOD colleagues just signed the MOU with the Evergreen Environmental Group Limited Corporation on knowledge partnership to celebrate this very important World Ocean Day today. The MOU aims to protect the ocean health, promote the circular economy through the public-private partnership to enhance particularly their solid waste management in Asia. Having mentioned this good progress made in the last few years, we also need to recognize the meaningful change must include everyone. The theme of this year's Ocean Day is life and livelihood. We choose to focus on the gender equality as well as the critical elements to ensure sustainable livelihoods for the coastal communities. Women play their vital role in managing coastal and marine resources. They made up the 70% of the global agricultural workforces, and also the Pacific contribute $1,110 million in revenue as a part of the fishery workforces as well. But despite of the women make up much of the workforces in coastal and the maritime, tourism, and also fisheries, women are still the lowest paid, lowest status, and also least protected jobs. So we must support full and meaningful acknowledgement of the women fisheries, seafood processors, marketers, scientists, decision makers to strengthen resilience and also encourage the more productive fisheries and improve the ocean resources management and the conservation efforts. So more than ever, the strong partnership very important to improve and strengthen the opportunities, laws, and also support the women needed to contribute effectively to the coastal resilience, ocean health, and also ensure their participation in the blue economy. So again, the COVID-19 has put enormous the pressures on women and also place on the gender equality. But at the same time, is also the offer the opportunity for us to look at how we are include everyone, particularly the women, for the natural positive recovery after the pandemic. Recovering from the pandemic must be green, blue, and also inclusive. So again, I want to just end my opening, my welcome remarks, say thank you to TNC for your working with us for this important event. And I also look forward learning more from the TNC and one of the panelists today. Thank you. Over to you, Sam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Xinfeng, for your insightful comments, and most importantly, for reminding us that we must support full and meaningful acknowledgement of women in order to improve ocean resource management and conservation efforts. And I also like, I think you said green, blue, and inclusive. That's a very important tagline to remember. I've been looking at who's been joining us today, and we truly have a global audience, which is really encouraging. So we have people joining us from Canada, the UK, Pakistan, Fiji, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Nepal, and France, to name a few. So that's really, really encouraging. And we look forward to engaging with you as we get through the dialogue. But right now, I'd like to introduce Ingrid Vanves, who is ADB's Vice President for Finance and Risk Management. And she has been a real champion of our work on oceans and blue finance in the Asia and Pacific region. VP Vanves is also a member of the Nature Conservancy program, Leading Women of the Ocean. Over to you, VP.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you very much. And with the audience coming from different parts of the world, I would like to say good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be with you today to celebrate World Oceans Day together and provide the opening remarks for this important webinar in partnership with the Nature Conservancy. The theme of World Oceans Day is life and livelihoods. And we take this opportunity to highlight the need for creating sustainable ocean livelihoods, particularly for women, whose contributions have not yet been fully recognized nor counted in the past as key actors in fisheries and related livelihoods. I like to emphasize that coastal communities are critical to the ocean economy. About 40% of the world's population currently lives in coastal zones, which are defined as areas within 100 kilometers of the coast. Excluding Papua New Guinea, 90% of Pacific Islanders live within 5 kilometers of the coast. And the proportion of populations living in coastal zones is only expanding. The coastal communities play a key role in supporting the ocean economy, including all forms of coastal and marine management, its governance, as well as a range of social and cultural values. Coastal communities are vital contributors to conservation, to marine risk responses, and climate mitigation, as well as adaptation. So while the coastal communities are key to healthy blue economies, gender equality is key to healthy coastal communities. All over the globe, women participate in small-scale fishing activities, mostly along the shoreline, either on foot or from small vessels in the coastal waters. Their participation in fishing activities is estimated to be the highest in the Pacific region, followed by East Asia. The relevance of the blue economy for women and their coastal communities is only underlined by women harvesting for home consumption, which is considered part of subsistence subsector, by women selling a portion of their catch and sharing the income with their families. And furthermore, sustainable ocean livelihoods can support women coping with and recovering from stresses and shocks, whilst valuing and working within the limits of natural resources at the same time. Despite growing attention for women and gender in fisheries, gender considerations continue to be underemphasized in fisheries policies and management worldwide. Women are largely invisible by a lack of proper representation, despite being a major part of the workforce. At ADB, we are committed to support gender equality through gender-inclusive project designs in at least 75% of our sovereign and non-sovereign operations by 2030. And this makes supporting women's participation in ocean livelihoods and coastal management a real priority for us. To create an enabling ecosystem for sustainable livelihoods and development, we need to enhance financial literacy and provide access to affordable finance for women and their coastal communities. At ADB, we assist by developing technical assistance that builds capacity around business planning and raises awareness on innovative technology solutions for women and communities. We're also working with sub-regions and countries to establish multi-stakeholder funds that include local and national governments, MDBs, and the private sector, to provide technical assistance and finance in various forms, such as concessional loans, grants, and equity. The means are used to support and build capacity at a community level through an inclusive approach that includes women, community leaders, and government decision makers. So to conclude, today we will hear about community efforts to build sustainable and resilient livelihoods. From the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the IUCN, it was Conservation of Nature, the Nature Conservancy, and ADB, that are working for women by creating jobs, supporting local economies, and protecting the environment. I believe that the success of our post-COVID-19 future is dependent on the quality of cooperation amongst all partners to develop, implement, and finance the right solutions for a green, blue, but also inclusive recovery. And with this in mind, I very much look forward to supporting ADB and TNC as we move forward in this exciting partnership to develop nature-positive investments, technical assistance, and knowledge sharing activities. Thank you. And over to you, Sam.
Thank you, VP Vanves, for your words and for being with us today. Indeed, as we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic, it will be critical, as you say, to focus on sustainable ocean livelihoods that can support women cope with and recover from the stresses and shocks, while also valuing and working within the limits of natural resources. So we will now move on to the panel part of our session. And firstly, I'm very happy to introduce Maeve Nightingale, who will provide us with an overview of women in coastal management in Asia. Maeve is the Senior Program Officer leading the IUCN Asia Regional Coastal and Marine Program, and she's also the regional focal point for gender equality. She has 22 years, vast experience working on addressing the multiple issues associated with sustainable coastal resource management, including disaster risk reduction, climate change mitigation and adaptation, through resilience building and integrated coastal management policy and practice across South and Southeast Asian countries. So a really rich background. Maeve, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you. I will just share my screen quickly here and get set up. Tanya, let me know if you can't see it, please. Is the screen visible?
Yes.
Thank you. So thank you very much, ADB and TNC, for organizing this event. It's a great pleasure to join you today and provide the overview for this webinar on gender and coastal resilience. A webinar celebrating this important World Oceans Day. And it's given me a welcome opportunity to stop and reflect again on the complexity and challenges packed up into that very simple phrase, gender and coastal resilience. Both the concept of resilience, that intricate coupling of social and ecological systems, and the concept and realities bound up in gender equality are both intricately related and linked, and yet complex in their own right. So I decided to take a trip down memory lane and to reflect on my own life's experiences. And I want to thank Zoni from ADB for encouraging me to do that, a little bit of a fresh look, because I know we've all had enough or a lot of webinars, and we're always seeking to try and find the stories that will entice new insights and understanding. So I revisited my photographs from 22 years ago, working in the Philippines with small-scale fisheries communities. I lived with communities for 7 years in the Philippines. And these experiences have shaped me, and they carry me each day and every day, today, even sitting at a desk much of the time. And they've had a profound impact on my life. And so I'd like to start setting the scenes by sharing with you a little bit of that journey, some of the pictures from that time of living in the Philippines for those 7 years. And I think you will all see, as you know, pictures paint 1,000 words, many dynamics between men and women. It's the Philippines context, but I think you will see many familiar relationships and dynamics to the communities that you are all familiar with. And I think these pictures probably require very little explanation and may help set the scene for today. So this time, you know, it's always really the chats with women where you find out about change and how to adapt to change. And really the backbone of many of the day-to-day decisions that are required in a changing environment where supply from wild-caught fisheries is not always reliable. This is a picture of working in the community with fishermen to look at where to protect the resources and how they would like to manage the protection zone and the fishing zone as a group, as an organization. Many hours spent at sea, understanding how it works, the ways of the sea, the seasonalities, the different gears, the different species that come around. The different fishing methods, the different risks that fishers take, both out at sea, but also in the near shore. This is a pair of wooden goggles adapted from the modern plastic looking goggles, or maybe we adapted our plastic goggles based on these. They're the most effective goggles I've ever worn. And then it's not just, of course, at sea with the fishing. It's once the fish catch comes back to land that there's a whole lot of work. That's in a way where the work begins again, in taking the fish from the nets, cleaning the nets, putting the nets back in an order that they can be reused again. And this is really, in most communities, all hands on deck. It's men, women, and children alike. To rearrange and put back in condition the nets for use the next day is a major task. And then, of course, there's the marketing of the fish products that come out. And as has been mentioned very eloquently in the opening remarks, still today, because this is an unpaid labor, the contribution of women in marketing, sorting and marketing fish is still under-recognized in terms of the economics and value chain of the fisheries today. And we need to continue working on that understanding. We've also been looking a lot at some of the small-scale backyard opportunities for developing livelihoods. Here we're looking at the options for setting up oyster culture, which is really just having a backyard security when finfish from the sea are not necessarily reliable. This is a picture from Hinatuan in Mindanao, where the simple sea urchin provides a luxury, high-value commercial species for selling in the local cities. These sea urchins are ripe on a full moon and bottled in rum bottles, but provide that monthly income to households, which is unique and seasonal and on a monthly basis. And here's some pictures of couples working together to take apart the sea urchin, to get out this important commodity resource. It's a job that's done by men and women and children. It's a very skilled job to actually take a sea urchin out without getting shell in the meat of the product and reducing the value. But as much as we focus on the dynamics between the two, this picture for me is really important in that it shows you not only a man very proud of who he is, his identity as a fisher, but it reminds me always that when the source of fish at sea is in decline, and we know that we have serious issues in overexploitation of our fisheries, it's the identity, it's the sheer identity and core identity of men to provide to their households, which is also impacted, which has a lot of knock-on effects at the household level. And so as much as we focus on empowerment of women when we talk about gender equality, we need to remember that it's also the identity of men to provide and fulfill their often socially dictated responsibilities to continue to make the household a happy and productive place. But really, it's the hours of talking with fishers, with women, creating that space where you find that trust and you'll find those intricate personal details, which is way different from looking at a one-stop workshop where we expect everybody's voices to come up. This group of women is an organization from Mahaba Island in Mindanao, and they have set up their own marine protected area. And it's just a typical picture of the kind of joys and sharing and comfort that happens. I'm going to skip on because I know I'm really limited for time. Just share with you some of these other images, and you'll all be able to also see in the PowerPoint presentation some of these pictures. So we know coastal and marine ecosystems are among the most productive ecosystems in the world, providing many services to human society. And it's no wonder that people seek to live on the coast. People that live in coastal communities, and I mean for generations, are closely connected to their local environments. And I've mentioned this for many generations because we also know that there is an issue of mass migration to coastal areas to seek opportunities with this open access resource, which is fisheries. And this migration and population to the coasts and the displacement often and conflicts in resource use that result from it are an important factor to be considered when we're talking about resilience. Unfortunately, today, many of our coastal ecosystems have become degraded due to overexploitation and quite serious pressures. And this is having a direct impact on small-scale fisheries in particular. And small-scale fisheries are critical, of course, for livelihoods and food security in coastal communities. And when we put it in the Asia context, it is quite significant. 90% of the world's 30 million fishers in Asia are in Asia, and roughly 80% of those are small-scale artisanal fishers relying on the near shore for their livelihoods and food security. So declining biological resources, the impacts of climate change, not to mention other disasters, and an example of the recent pandemic as well, take their toll and have an important implication for resilience in coastal communities and linked together. So turning to the gender, women and men differ in how they interact and depend on coastal ecosystems, how they use the ecosystems, which products they choose, and the benefits that they receive. And women and men hold different knowledge and experience of their ecosystems, and both are equally essential for building and maintaining resilience. So it's important to understand these dynamics. The dynamics at the household and community level is essential if we're going to develop successful and implement successful programs. And identifying and addressing gender inequalities is part of that. And when we talk about gender inequalities, I think we're all familiar with what we mean here. It's that access and control over resources, decision-making power, mobility, livelihoods, and how we use those analyses and develop good, robust projects. In fact, without gender equality, without understanding those dynamics and achieving gender equality, resilience cannot be built. Building resilience contributes to gender equality as much as gender equality contributes to resilience. And these two things are closely coupled. I think the recent example of the COVID pandemic has really shone a light on exactly on how inequality works, and particularly female inequality. So what do we need to consider? We need to consider in moving forward, preparing women, the skills in education and leadership, making the space for the voice and presence in governance, recognizing the powers of women's organizations, and ensuring that we have within our own development programs, robust mainstreaming strategies in place. This is just the last slide. So if we'd actually just articulate a little bit about what we mean by gender goals in some of our development programs, there are a range of things from welfare, most basic level, reproductive needs, which I call mainly dealing with the drudgery reduction, productivity, new and more efficient ways to participate in economic activities for women, empowerment and equality and equity, new roles and opportunities beyond the traditional ones, and participation on an equal basis of men and women, and project efficiency, roles, needs, challenges, and that need to be properly understood through good gender analyses of the dynamics. I'm sorry to be so speedy, 10 minutes gone so fast, and thank you very much. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Maeve, and sorry that you have to rush. I'm sure you have a lot that you could share. And thank you also for sharing those amazing images. As they say, pictures paint 1,000 words, and what you shared were really powerful in terms of highlighting the issues. It was a really creative way to set the scene. So I'm sure people will have questions for you, but I think we would like to hear from our other two speakers first and then come back to questions for the whole panel at the end. So now I would like to introduce Ruth Cornier, who's put on her camera there. She is the manager of Mangrove Market Mary in Papua New Guinea. And Ruth has had a long career in conservation and development, where she has managed community-based conservation and development projects, communications, capacity building, and grant making. She has been with the TNC since 2010, leading communications for the entire program and leading the Mangrove Market Mary program since its inception in 2017. Now, in this role, she works with communities, government, and other partners to build women's livelihoods and benefits through sustainable mangrove management. Ruth currently also serves on the Global Green Grants Fund Pacific Islands Advisory Board, where she works with other Pacific Islands advisors on grant making in Papua New Guinea. So Ruth, you have the floor. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everyone. As I was introduced, my name is Ruth, and I work for the Nature Conservancy in Papua New Guinea. Firstly, I'd like to thank ADB and the organizers of the event to have me on this World Oceans Day to speak for what we are doing in terms of working with the women community here. I'd just like to introduce TNC for those who do not know the Nature Conservancy. It's a science-based organization working in about 72 countries and territories, including Papua New Guinea. TNC is a science-based organization, and science is clear that mangroves play a critical role in providing habitat for biodiversity and food security, keeping carbon in the ground and providing coastal protection from storm surge. Can I have the slide 2, please? As you can see, the Papua New Guinea is in the red circle. Yes. All right, I'll go on to slide 3, please. Right. PNG is home to some of the most intact and diverse mangrove ecosystem in the world. But when we started working on mangrove conservation, the drivers of habitat loss weren't so clear to us and didn't even follow existing literature and evidence apart from climate change and its impact. We also learned that women are the primary managers of the mangrove systems, mainly for food security and fuel. So in order to conserve the mangroves, we need to empower the women. However, women face many barriers to engage in conservation meaningfully, including cultural barriers, unconscious biases, lack of education, access to information, and violence. These barriers prevented and excluded them from participating in many formal economies. To the next slide, please. So in response, we thought of an idea to give women a voice. That is about connecting women to the economy by firstly looking at markets that are already available and that women are engaged in terms of the mud crabs, for example, and to build on what we are learning to engage women in a bigger and emerging markets such as blue carbon. And so we developed Mangrove Market Mary, or sometimes we just call it MMM. And it is a network of women across Papua New Guinea that thinks holistically about how to meaningfully engage women in conservation. Critically, MMM addresses economic sustainability by connecting women to markets that provide greater value for their products. A big part of this work is building financial literacy and business planning. Example, we did some work on mud crab. We're trying to connect these women to the buyers that are already available, so these women can have premium prices for their mud crabs. We also did a value chain analysis on how to understand where the markets are, so we link our women to the markets that are available. Next slide, please. Yes, but there is another piece that is holding back women, and that is gender-based violence or violence. COVID-19 pandemic has taken its toll on our country and our work, but it has also pointed a spotlight on another pandemic of gender-based violence and family violence here in PNG. Gender-based violence not only puts women at risk, but it limits Papua New Guinea's overall economic growth, and it prevents women from contributing to crucial efforts to protect and restore our planet. Given the stakes of these environmental challenges, we cannot afford to leave women behind. It's encouraging to see that our national government recently held a public hearing on this topic. Next slide, please. So in our work, we are addressing gender-based violence by taking a whole family approach to community conservation efforts. We're helping to educate men about the role women can play in mangrove conservation. And by doing that, we are partnering with K International PNG to conduct referral mapping exercises to better respond to gender-based violence. And as we think about efforts to engage women in marine and coastal conservation, we must continue to look at safety and equity impacts in order to creating lasting change for both the planet and our people. My presentation is rather short, but thank you. The last slide, please. Yes, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ruth, for sharing with us the experience of your MMM program. and also making the important links to other contextual issues such as gender-based violence. Our next speaker is Nashiba Salim, my colleague, and Nashiba is a social development and gender specialist in the ADB's Bangladesh resident mission. Her areas of specialization include gender relations and equality, women's empowerment, mainstreaming gender across sector programs, violence against women, sex work and human rights, early marriage, and the feminization of poverty. So a whole range of gender expertise there. Previously, before joining ADB, she worked with the United Nations Development Programme in Bangladesh and also the Bangladesh Rural Advancement Committee. Nashiba, you have the floor.
Good afternoon and good morning and good evening. It's a pleasure to be here and be able to share some of our experiences working in the coastal communities in Bangladesh. So because we have limited time, I'll just jump right into it. Next slide, please. So Bangladesh globally is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. It is estimated that by 2050, 1 in every 7 people in Bangladesh will be displaced by climate change, and up to 18 million people may have to move because of sea level rise alone. The climate change impacts cause damages to roads, cyclone shelters, markets, growth centers, and it also limits access to these different services and public spaces due to, for example, flooding and waterlogging caused by extreme tides, monsoons and floods, etc. And these disasters impact women and men differently, with women being more vulnerable to men, both in terms of short-term recurrent climate events such as natural disasters and long-term climate-induced changes such as sea rise, level rise, or salinity intrusion in water and soil, etc. And this is because they magnify existing social and gender inequalities. Women in coastal areas are more vulnerable due to, for example, limited access to materials and financial resources, limited access to or lack of access to clean water and sanitation, etc. Also, one of the things we have been seeing related to natural disasters and these climate changes is that families often have to migrate out of these sort of vulnerable areas, which means that it is especially hard for women because they have to take on additional tasks to set up the new household in a completely new environment and community, and also be responsible finding more money for the economic livelihoods for the families and the households. Furthermore, there are social barriers for women, which make them more vulnerable. And these are basically religious beliefs and socio-cultural traditions, which I will talk more in detail later on in the presentation. In terms of what I would like to discuss today, the ADB project, which is called Coastal Climate Resilient Infrastructure Project. This project design included multiple consultations with communities and key stakeholders, both in the households and the communities themselves, as well as it tried to include the collection of sex desegregated data with a clear gender analysis to ensure that issues and concerns of both men and women were reflected in the design. Next slide, please. So the Coastal Climate Resilient Infrastructure Project in Bangladesh Resident Mission ADB works with 12 districts of the Southwestern Coastal Region, and also is the government agency that is responsible is the Local Government Engineering Department. The project aims to improve climate resilience of coastal community by improved road network with all-weather climate-proof roads, climate-proof rural markets, and multi-purpose cyclone shelters. Some of the key gender elements, which I will discuss a little bit more in detail in the next slides, include a gender-responsive infrastructure, interventions and activities related to women's decision-making power, and economic empowerment, and increased knowledge and skills or capacity building related specifically to natural disaster risk management, climate change, etc. Next slide, please. So in the interest of time, I would very broadly, there's a lot of work that has gone into this project in terms of gender-related activities, targets, and ensuring the benefits to women and children and everybody through this project. But very broadly speaking, these are some of the key areas of achievements that I would like to discuss. So one of the key areas of achievement through the implementation of what we in ADB call the Gender Action Plan, which has specific activities and interventions laid out to be implemented during the project period, is the enhanced economic opportunities. There's a range of economic opportunities that was provided through the project, but I would like to highlight two here. One was that in the project, we ensured that in the market, as I said, initially, one of the key activities was building or rebuilding markets in the village and communities in the coastal areas. And we've had 15% space allocation for women in the open market sheds and in the women market for them to be able to come and sell their produce directly. And for the physical infrastructure, we also tried to ensure that women participated in unskilled labor and had an opportunity to earn income through it. In terms of enhancing capacity, again, there's a whole range of activities, but some of the key ones is that one of the things the project did was to either form or to activate the cyclone shelter management committees at the local government level, which was 22 cyclone shelter management committees, where there was a specific number of women members that was required. In this case, we had 26 or 27% women members. And this basically meant that women were able to participate in the decision making. For example, where the cyclone shelters would be built, what kind of design would be done, how to ensure that the cyclone shelters are easily accessible to women, are actually beneficial.
Nashiba, are you with us? I think she might be frozen. Yes, I think Nashiba, unfortunately, she's frozen. Hopefully she will get back to us soon. But in the meantime, perhaps I can see some questions coming in. Maybe I can take the opportunity to ask some questions. There's some questions here for you, Maeve, I think, from Lisa, who's a colleague of ours. And she says that she was intrigued by what you said that marketing fish is unpaid labor for women. And she wanted to know whether this is because the money from the sale of fish goes directly to men. And her second question is that you also mentioned men's identity as providers for their families, but as stocks of fish decline, that identity is being threatened. So what are some of the consequences of these? Perhaps you could respond to those questions, please, Maeve.
Thank you, and thank you for the questions. Yes, I think it's fairly well established now that, you know, in the roles within fishing communities, particularly, and not at the fish aggregator level, but if you like, the seafront level, it's really very frequently the women's role to separate, sort, and prepare for market the fish or the catch or the resources that come from the sea. And this is a role they play within their own family setup. Often it's the male who will be the one to collect the resources from the sea, and then this role of separation and preparation for market by female. It's not something which is directly paid for. It is something that could be compensated for in the household income for those fish that is received. But it does take an immense amount of time. So when you're looking at time management and the division of labor across women's traditionally productive roles, and then, reproductive roles, and then add this productive role, is a significant amount of time which is spent by women on a daily basis in playing this role without receiving direct compensation for that time to them as individuals. And this is why really in fisheries value chain analysis, this effort is not captured in terms of economic value, and therefore we're getting an undervaluation of fisheries. On the second point about men's identity, I think this is quite important. I think it's important to recognize that, yes, we have division of roles between men and women. It's often traditionally men who go out to sea. And as, you know, but it's based on an expectation that men will provide fisheries resources for sale, availability for sale, for income for their families. And if this setup is threatened, it often means a threat to their sense of self-identity. And in societies, we are all judged both men and women, of what is expected of us. And if we're not able to fulfill the roles that are expected of us, it has quite a complex impact on how we manage to remain confident and agents of positive change within our households, within our communities. And this is the point I was trying to make here. I've seen it again. It turns to alcoholism, it turns to violence against women. And I don't want to generalize these things, but there are some clear patterns that are linked with depletion of fisheries resources and the loss of identity as fishers.
Thanks very much, Maeve. And I see we have Nashiba back. Welcome back.
I am so sorry. I apologize to everybody. I mentioned in the morning to the team, we have a bit of a bad weather and our electricity keeps coming and going. And
No problem.
Sorry. So I've connected to my phone now, so I'm all good to go.
No problem. That's the reality of the virtual world, so we all understand. But perhaps you'd like to just pick off quickly where you left off.
Yeah, sure. While it's loading, I mean, I can keep talking. So I was on the gender achievements. Thank you very much. And I'll try to go quickly. Actually, the one that I was talking about, the last one, was the gender responsive physical infrastructure, which actually is one of the key highlights of the project. So in the different infrastructures were, for example, the cyclone shelters or the toilets in the women markets and some boat landing platform, etc. I would like to share quickly two stories, which is for the design of the toilets in the markets. For example, the initial design had the toilets entrance for men and women side by side with facing the same way, which meant that the men could see the women coming and going into the toilets. During our consultations, when we discussed it with the community on how the design should be, where the toilet should be, the women raised this issue that because of the sociocultural traditions in Bangladesh, they were not very comfortable with using toilets where men could see them coming and going. And based on that feedback, we then changed the design of the toilets where the entrances of the men and women toilets were facing opposite of each other, which meant that from now on, when the women wanted to use the toilets, they would use it in a way where they did not have to see, the men did not have to see them going and coming into the toilets, as well as ensuring that the toilet site of the toilets were identified by the women and men in a space where women felt safe. There was enough lighting, and so that the toilets were friendly to women and were used by women. Very quickly, in terms of the cyclone shelters, the design, for example, included separate corners for women on each floor of the shelters, which is usually 1 or 2 floors, as well as a dedicated room for women to be used for various purposes, for example, breastfeeding, or putting the children to sleep, or for napping, and in some cases, in emergencies, even child deliveries. And these cyclone shelters were well lit and became more user-friendly, or became better for women to, or women-friendly to be used. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Sorry, am I gone again? Okay, great. So in terms of the challenges, there are quite a few challenges, but in the interest of time, I've kind of clubbed them together in 3 key areas. One is the governance challenges, or governance related challenges, which primarily means that there's a high turnover of the local government officials, as well as even in the change in the local government body of elected and selected members, which meant that there was also a challenge to continuously make sure that the people that we work with on the ground were sensitized or oriented or understood what gender equality and social inclusion or gender mainstreaming meant at the ground level for the project or for the benefit of the coastal communities in Bangladesh. As well as there's a lack of sustained coordination among the different decision-making committees. For example, the Cyclone Shelter Management Committee, Local Disaster Preparedness Committee, and relevant Union Parishad, which often meant that things fell through the cracks, or there was repetition of things done and not everybody was on the same page. In terms of operational issues or matters, the first one is not specific to this project, but it relates to most of the infrastructure related projects that we do on the ground, which is ensuring proper and sustained operation and maintenance of the infrastructures beyond the project period. This is always challenging and something that we've been working on to ensure that, their operation and maintenance committees are well trained, are able to do the work, and even trying to put some budget in there for the projects to be able to do the O&M past the project period. And safety concerns remain challenging because allocating or designing separate spaces or corners or relevant designs for women is not enough. What needs to happen is that there needs to be a proper administration and gender sensitive committee that can ensure that during disasters, the spaces and facilities are allocated for women and girls accordingly. In terms of sociocultural tradition and beliefs, one of the sociocultural or traditional belief is that people are often reluctant to evacuate during natural disasters, primarily because of mistrust of the warning systems, unwilling to leave livestock and property and their houses. Safety issues for females always there, where women are more, it's more expected that women would stay behind, take care of the livelihood, the livestock, the household, and etc. And these are some of the reasons why there is a reluctance to evacuation or taking shelter during disasters. And religious practice, sometimes it prevents women from evacuating their homes, because in the Bangladeshi Islamic perceptions or tradition, women should not be in the women should not be in the presence of men other than their own relatives. And in the cyclone shelter, you would all be together with non-relative male members. And women's main role in the household or in the family is to protect the livestock, household goods, and the children. I've been working in this area through my work with BRAC and UNDP as well for quite a while. And what I have noticed that over time, one of the things that have changed and the government has done quite well on is to dispel this mistrust of the scientific warning system. So that has, and this warning system has been widely disseminated information and accessible to men and women, which has also made women women are more likely to come to cyclone shelters during natural disasters. Last slide, very quickly. Some of the lessons learned is participatory approaches must be used from the beginning to ensure maximum benefit, which I've mentioned already in terms of the consultations and making sure that men and women both are involved in the design implementation of the project. New livelihoods for women and other vulnerable groups must be locally relevant. So yes, definitely fisheries is one of them. We also have some a lot of sewing and other sort of livelihood options for the communities, and it has to consider the time spent by women on them, depending, so that they're able to do that and make sure that other household duties or responsibilities are met. And this is, I didn't go into a lot of it, but I know previous speakers spoke quite a bit about it, which is the awareness raising and understanding the relationship between increased gender-based violence and natural disasters and its impact on women and girls, and preventive measures must be integrated in project design, which we've done a little bit in this project, but hope to do more in the upcoming projects. I apologize for the technical glitch. I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nashiba. And that was another really rich presentation. So thank you. Time is limited, but we do have a few questions coming in, which I would like to try to get to. So firstly, this is a question for Ruth, please. The question is coming from Julia Besana, and Julia would like you to tell more about how the work on mud crabs informs other markets such as blue carbon. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Ruth.
Hi, thank you for the question. Firstly, mud crab is something that women have already been engaging in, but primarily they were doing it in isolation. Like each of the women fishers were taking their mud crabs individually to the market and sitting for long hours and not being able to get a good price for it. Sometimes they sell their crabs, most times they don't, and their crabs die and they come back home with nothing. So this is something that women were already engaged in. So when we first started working with the mothers, we did a market value chain analysis in terms of linking how the mud crabs end up in the market and how they actually end up in people's homes or in restaurants. So what we did the value chain analysis on the mud crab, and we learned a lot of lessons that we thought of applying it to other bigger markets like the blue carbon. And blue carbon at the moment is something that the country is not prepared for. And we are actually pioneering this in terms of learning from the lessons that we are doing with mud crab, how to link up to the markets. And based on our experiences, we are looking at now venturing into the blue carbon market. We are doing stock assessments and analysis in terms of identifying where things are. We are doing a situation and analysis as well to gather all the data that we can, and we're reaching back into our own TNC science team to assist us in terms of working towards having a blue carbon market established for our women and having them benefit from blue carbon while they conserve mangroves. So that's what we are doing at the moment.
Thank you very much, Ruth. I'd just like to maybe pick up on two last questions that were earlier in the chat, and they're both from Siddharth Acharya. And I think this is probably best for you, May, but anyone that would like to jump in, it's fine. The question is, what are alternative sources of income for fishing communities to ensure security when fish catch is unreliable? And related to that, are we seeing trends of reverse migration from coasts, and how do we plan ahead for this?
These are the questions in the chat, right? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so the discussion around alternative livelihoods, of course, is very context specific. And it really is a process of understanding, again, those dynamics and the opportunities, and facilitating a process of understanding what are the different scenarios or outcomes that communities want, what are the resources available, and skill sets, and all of these different things. So there's no one-stop shop to answering that question in a way, or as any secret there. But in principle, if we're talking about fishing communities, coastal communities, we're looking at livelihoods that build on the skills and capacities and materials and resources and empowerment opportunities of local communities, remove the pressure on the wild ecosystem, if you like. Don't affect or influence the dynamic of the system as a whole, but remove pressure, if anything, on the need to extract resources from the wild system. And so as low impact and sustainable as possible. So there are many different options there. You know, we've seen all sorts of things, the handicrafts options, alternative products, post-harvest production, meaning the preparation of different products that they increase the value on the market. But it will really be determined by those specific opportunities that are available within a particular community. And we have quite a number of publications on coastal community livelihoods that we could share to explain a little bit about the diversity of those different options.
Thanks very much, Maeve. Unfortunately, we're running quick out of time, but I just wanted to give the opportunity to VP Vanves, if she's still on the call, if she would like to add anything to supplement the blue economy issue, since I know this is something that she really champions on behalf of ADB. Ingrid, would you like to jump in to say a few words?
Well, what I first of all want to thank the panelists and also the audience for the amazing questions that enabled everybody to highlight the points that are really going on. And then for my side, I think the big message would be getting women out of the shade by fully including them in data and stakeholder analysis, but also as change agents and in training programs for enhancement and expansion of various conservation of resources. I think these are important next steps to enhance our programs and bring it further for everybody, not just the ladies, but also the gentlemen together.
Thank you very much, VP. We've had a really good discussion, and I'm sure we could continue talking for a lot longer, but unfortunately, time is short. So I would like to now invite Robin James, who is the Gender and Equity Advisor for the Nature Conservancy's Asia Pacific Division, to say a few words in closing. And Robin has been a leader in conservation for more than 20 years and developed experience in gender, equity, and social justice along the way, as well as community-based conservation, philanthropy, and government policies and programs. So Robin, please take the floor.
Thank you so much, Samantha, and thank you so much to the fellow panelists, to Xinfeng and VP Ingrid for leading us through today, and Samantha for her brilliant facilitation. It's such a pleasure being part of this partnership between the Nature Conservancy and the Asian Development Bank. It goes from the big issues that we're talking around green, blue, and an inclusive economy, which I really love, But then it gets right down to the brilliant partnerships we're getting. Just for a small example, putting this event together has just been such a joy to work with our colleagues at ADB. So I just feel like the challenges that are facing our world are really urgent, and they're very complex. And this has been highlighted today by all of our panelists, that there's just no easy solution. So Maeve kind of talked about the complexity of markets, as did Ruth, and then just simple examples, for example, of where you site a toilet can make all the difference to the outcome of a program or a project. And so for me, what's kind of been highlighted to me today is this need to think holistic about this, that we really do need to think at every level to do sort of deep analysis, that we can't put gender in at the end of our programs or projects. We really need to do this really deep analysis at the beginning and all the way through and at every level. And one thing that's been really highlighted to me is that this incredible experience that I got to listen to today. So I just sort of looked at everyone's CVs and thought, wow, there's over 100 years of collective experience on these issues around oceans in this virtual room today, which is pretty amazing. And I'd just like to say I'm very grateful to Vice President Ingrid for her leadership. She's been shining a spotlight on the crucial role of women and the role that they can and have to play to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. She's a valuable member of our Leading Women of the Oceans program, which is a network of women leaders across the Asia Pacific, including people such as Maria Damanaki, our previous European Oceans Commissioner, and the former First Lady of Japan. And they're all lending their expertise and platforms to centre the importance of gender equity in ocean conservation and ocean management, including our fisheries, which some of Maeve's data and some of our other panelists' data is pretty confronting. Our fisheries are just so crucial to this region. So we need champions at the top, but also the three panelists really highlighted to me that we need women at every single level, from the village level where Ruth and others are working, where if we don't understand the drivers, for example, of mangrove loss by talking to the women, talking to people in the communities, we sometimes come to the wrong conclusions. So Ruth did these detailed household surveys and found out that in some of those communities, drivers of mangrove loss were due to not to what we thought they were. They were due to sometimes young men being very disengaged and very disenfranchised and burning some of the mangroves down because of various reasons. So we really needed to work with them if we wanted to have mangrove conservation. So it's really about understanding the whole system. So I'm really grateful to be on this panel today, and I'd like to thank you all so much. And I'm really looking forward to the next event with Asia Development Bank, TNC, and also IUCN. So thank you so much, Samantha, and I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much also, Robin. And to our speakers and audience today and everyone that's participated, we sincerely appreciate you taking the time to be here. We've had over 200 participants throughout this webinar from all parts of the globe, and that's really a testimony to the importance and relevance and interest in this subject. So that's really, really great. But before we go, we just have a couple of things. We'd like to plug a ADB introductory course on coastal resilience that people can access. And I believe the link is being put up there on the screen. And also before you go, we really want to hear from you, and we can hear from you in different ways. So please put your comments in the chat box. We also have a QR code that you can use, and I believe that's also on the screen. But please also continue to follow us on Facebook if you would like to participate in other events in the future, and we would love to keep in touch. So thanks again for joining us today. Happy Oceans Day once again. See you next time. Stay safe and stay healthy, everybody. Goodbye.